Hello, I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and this is Writing as a Nurse, Describing Stakeholders. This is a targeted webinar that looks at a theme that will come back in several of our programs, in the nursing programs, and also in healthcare administration, which is to say, writing about stakeholders. Now, stakeholders aren't unique to a medical setting, but we're going to be looking at the particular types and sets of stakeholders that you get in healthcare. So if you are in one of our other related programs, for example, conflict management, the general principles will apply, but the specific examples that we'll be looking at are, again, drawn from healthcare. If you're new to the Writing Center, we work with students in just about every online program at ACU. And we work through students through a variety of channels. We have webinars such as this, all of which you can find recordings of on our website. We have workshops we do. We have templates, sample papers, and other resources like that. And we are also available for two different types of appointments. An asynchronous appointment, which the majority of our students use, an asynchronous appointment, you schedule a time using the My ACU link at the top of the slide. You schedule time, and by the time that appointment rolls around, let's say 12 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday, by the time that appointment rolls around, you upload a copy of your draft and any specific questions or requests you might have about types of feedback or part of the paper you're especially interested in getting input on. And then we look at it and send you feedback via email within 24 hours normally. You can also, on that same schedule, if you look, you'll see that some of the available appointments are labeled for phone or Zoom. So these are real-time appointments. And you schedule them the exact same way, but when that time rolls around, you want to be available to join us. So if you scheduled a Zoom appointment, then go ahead and go to your appointment and there'll be a Zoom link for you to use. If you scheduled a phone call, then we will call you. Just make sure that your phone number is current and correct, because if you give us your office number and you're going to be home when the appointment comes around, well, it'll be a little bit harder to connect. All of our resources, including webinars such as this, templates, sample papers, and more, are available on the Online Writing Center website, the bottom link on this page. We have a lot of webinars that we offer every term for the first time, as well as a few recurring ones. We have a number of ones in the healthcare sequence that may be of interest to students in our nursing programs. And with that, I'll just give a plug for the program-specific webinar guide. If you go to the Writing Webinars website and you scroll down past the schedule, you'll see this tabbed browsing area. You can select a particular program and it'll show you sorted by the course. For example, Nursing 601. And sorted by the course, it'll show you any webinars that we have that tie into specific assignments or other elements of those specific courses. So it's a great way to see, what do we have for your course now? And we update that throughout the term as we offer new webinars and the recordings become available. And that's constantly expanding every term, so check back and see what we have. I mentioned we have templates. We have an APA course paper template that you'll see me using later. We also post our videos to YouTube, and we have a blog. With that, let us shift gears and focus on our primary learning objectives for today. We're going to start out by understanding stakeholders in healthcare. We're going to move on to the specific assignment for Nursing 622, and we'll finish with a discussion of outlining and drafting, including key sources that you will be citing for this assignment. All right, so let's talk about stakeholders in healthcare. A good place to start is, what is a stakeholder? And in this particular context, a common definition is a person or group with a vested interest in a particular clinical decision and the evidence that supports that decision. This is a definition that you see used a lot in the literature because it acknowledges a couple things. First, that many stakeholders are individuals, but they're also groups, whether that's a group of individuals such as the nurses at a hospital or the chief medical officers of a different group, and also entities. Sometimes a hospital itself is a stakeholder. And so whether it's an organization, a corporation, an individual, or some combination of the above, stakeholders are these entities that have a vested interest, meaning it's not just idle curiosity, it's something that does affect them in some meaningful way, or they care about it, and a particular clinical decision and the evidence that supports that decision. So if you are moving into another context, rather than clinical decision, we might say, okay, professional practice or policy or something like that. But for healthcare, right now, we're looking at clinical decisions. Now, this particular definition, one of the reasons it's used a lot is because it comes from the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, which is a government entity that does a lot of research and position papers and things like that to try and improve the quality of healthcare in the United States, including related research. So they provide a list of stakeholders. Now, this may not be true for all projects, but it's a good starting point of the groups that you should consider including on your list. Starting with patients, caregivers, and patient advocacy organizations, clinicians and their professional associations, institutional healthcare providers such as hospital systems and medical clinics, government agencies. AHRQ is a great example of a stakeholder. They care a lot about research that's going on, and they care a lot about policies that may improve, hopefully will improve, patient care quality. Purchasers and payers. Yes, this is definitely a big concern in the United States. Healthcare industry representatives, policymakers at different levels, researchers, and research institutions. Now, this is a large group of entities, and while it might be fair in a big sense to say that these will always be applicable, there are some that will sometimes be more applicable than others, or more imminent or close than others. And for this, I have provided a breakdown of how AHRQ has diagrammed stakeholders for the effective healthcare program. Now you see that there's at the top the blue, that's the program phase. So we have topic development, topic refinement, research review, research needs development. So these are 4 different stages. And the green is talking about the purpose of each stage. The kind of pink at the bottom, that is listing who are the stakeholders that are most imminent for that particular task. And one of the things I love about this graphic is that it makes it clear that while all these stakeholders are involved to some degree, there are some who are more relevant to be consulting at different stages. So when you're just initially exploring the topic, as you can see on the chart, it suggests that you want to be doing expert consultants. To be engaging expert consultants, because you're trying to narrow things down to, okay, where are we going on this? And then as you start to get more specific, it becomes, oh, okay, so if we're doing this, this is now the topic refinement step. If we're doing this thing, who are our experts for this? Who actually know about this specific thing, as opposed to the more big picture experts in the previous step? And eventually this moves towards the team of stakeholders, who may include clinicians and people on the ground, as it were. And so the idea is you start out and you want people who have a perspective that is informed about the thing that you're looking at right now. whatever that should be. All right, let's take a look now at the specific guidelines for Nursing 622's Week 5 Assignment 1, Identifying Stakeholders and Authority. Now, this assignment starts out with a brief preamble, one sentence preamble. Key stakeholders have valuable perspectives to offer in the planning, conducting, and interpreting the results of quality improvement programs. Now, this is presented as a preamble, but I would say that it's also providing a piece of advice because it talks about three things that key stakeholders have to offer in their perspectives. And with that in mind, that would be a good idea to discuss in your paper, what they offer for planning, conducting, and interpreting QIP results. And then we move into the assignment proper. In this assignment, you will identify all the potential stakeholders for your chosen performance measure. And if you're looking at the instructions on the website, you'll see that I've reformatted the instructions without changing the text. I've reformatted it to clarify when you're being asked to do a discrete task. So task number 1, consider the type of authority that these stakeholders hold in the organization and the benefits of including them. Now, this is a great time to go back to that preamble and say, planning, conducting, and interpreting. What are the benefits that they have to offer at each of those stages? And with your different groups of stakeholders, they are probably going to be more or less valuable at different stages. Then an explanation or offering a list of different groups you can start with for examples of stakeholders: administrators, nurse educators, nurse navigators or case managers, lab staff, IT staff, physicians, professional organizations, politicians. And then a note: which of the stakeholders should you closely assign yourself for your chosen performance measure, and explain why. So we've got that performance measure that we need to list, discuss, and then say why it's relevant to whichever groups of stakeholders you have identified and which you're going to be working most closely with. And then a few other specifications, 2 or 3 pages in length, so that's going to be roughly 500 to 750 words. We need to have a couple recent sources to show that this is still a current and active issue, which is an important thing to keep in mind when we look at the required readings for this week. And of course, have this formatted in APA style, including a reference page and using citations. So that's all pretty pro forma. Let's now look at the rubric. So the rubric tells us we're going to need at least 5 different stakeholders. And that's not 5 individuals, but 5 classes of people or organizations. So at least 5 stakeholders related to the performance measure, for each of which you discuss the type of power or authority they have and the benefit for including them. And from that list of at least 5, to discuss which you should align with most closely and why. Okay, so it looks like we're probably going to have somewhere around 1.5 pages to 2 pages about those 5 stakeholders, and then zeroing in on the identified stakeholders that you'll align with the most closely. And if we look at the way that the points are distributed here, we can see that, 15% of the credit goes for, is this formatted, the correct length, and things like that. And then the other 85%, if roughly 2/3 of that should go towards describing those at least 5 sets of stakeholders and why they are why they're on your list, what types of power, what the benefits of including them. And then the other third of that 85% is why you should work with some of them, particularly because of the alignment with the performance measure. Now, you'll see me using our APA course paper template, and so if you don't have that, go ahead and download that now. We're going to start by talking through some of the sources that are mentioned in this week's reading and what it would like to cite them. So first off, we have the textbook Leadership Roles and Management Functions in Nursing, Theory and Application. Great book. This is by Markey and Huston, and it was written in 2017, so it's coming in right at 5 years old. Simple enough, author date citation. Next piece, we have an online article from MindTools. MindTools is the corporate author. And when you're looking at this in the online website, you'll see it's not quite APA 7 style. So to adapt this to APA 7, we want to italicize the name of the web page, which is French and Raven's 5 Forms of Power. That's a specific web page on the site. And we don't include the retrieve from that. That's a text that previous versions of APA style used. But in APA 7, we don't include that anymore. And you just cite this as MindTools. Because the page has no date, that's where the N period, D period comes in. And then we have a YouTube video. Now, with the YouTube video, you use the channel name however that's written, which is how we have Institute for Healthcare Improvement -IHI. If you were formatting that on your own, I would suggest that, the IHI is redundant, but our job here, when we're citing YouTube video, we need to accurately display for the author whatever the channel name was. And in this case, they had -IHI at the end, so that's what we have here. The publication information or the reference includes the year, the month, and the day. That's 2015, December 18. But when you are citing it, you only include the year there. And yes, it does look a little bit odd to have that -IHI at the end, but again, we need to accurately cite and reference the channel name as it's published down. Now, if you want to refer to this particular speaker in the video, because the channel name gets listed as the author for the citations, you can reference the speaker. We just need to use the signal phrase like this. According to Rybid, that Dr. Rybid is the speaker that you see in the picture to the left, and then to cite where you got the information from Ryman, then you list author date, in parentheses, Institute for Healthcare Improvement, IHI, 2015. So if you are just citing the source, Institute for Healthcare Improvement, IHI, 2015, if you want to specifically single out the speaker, just use a language like according to Ryman, and then have a parenthetical citation. All right, let us look back at the template that I referred to earlier. Okay, I have here a blank copy of our APA course paper template. And if you're using this for the first time, after you read through the instructions and watch any documentation like that, I recommend that you go ahead and go to Review on the ribbon and go ahead and select Delete and delete all comments in document. And that will give you more of a clean copy. For this particular assignment, we're not using an abstract, so you can just go ahead and delete that. And then we'll just take out this placeholder text as well. So it's always a good idea to start with, if you know you're using a source, to go ahead and add that to your references list. Now, it's an APA rule that you should only have items in your reference list that you cite. You should only cite things that are in your reference list if it's a published source. So there'll be a step where you go and check and make sure that you have references for everything that you cite, and you cite everything that you're referencing. But let's start out with, okay, you're probably going to be using those recommended readings, so let's go ahead and put them there. While we're on that topic, it might be helpful to talk quickly about this source here that's also in the reading for this week. So this article here, it's a co-authored piece. It's a co-authored piece where we have the two authors, we have the DOI, the Digital Object Identifier, and then in the module, it also gives us a direct link to the article. Now, it is helpful to have these two in some situations, but in our case, for a reference list, the DOI takes precedence. To have both is redundant. Now, it's convenient to have, oh, here's the DOI that leads to wherever it is permanently, and here's one that will more directly go through your library system, perhaps. But when it comes to putting in the reference entry, we want to have just the highest level one, which is in this case the DOI. So you should not have two links here. You should be having the DOI in the most up-to-date format, which is as you see on the slide. And once you've copied the entries here into your reference list, the first thing to do is to make sure that they're in the right order. So in this case, we need to alphabetize them by the first author's last name, or in the case of an organizational name like Institute for Healthcare Improvement, IHI, or Mind Tools, to go by the first letters of that name. So IHI will go first, then the Leviton and Melikar source. Make sure you put the comma for the ampersand. Then Markey and Huston, then Mind Tools. So if we think we're going to be citing those, we start from the position of having all these in our references list. Now the next step is to go ahead and start structuring things. And this is a good point to copy and paste the assignment instructions to make sure you get everything that is specified in the order and using the language that is given. Alright, now I've pasted in the text here, and the first thing you'll notice is that the font has changed. That's the font from the original source, not the one I'm using in the paper. So if you see this little box here for paste options, after you paste something, you can select things like, oh, match destination formatting, which will convert it to the font that we're using in the rest of the paper. So now it's more consistent. And we can go ahead and see, okay, well, this is preamble here. I'm just going to go ahead and italicize this so we can see that that's information that was copied and pasted. And then we have different tasks, and I'm going to start bulleting those. So we have these three things, but looking at it, oh, before you identify the potential stakeholders for the performance measure, we should list my performance measure, whatever that should be. And give a note to myself, include a citation and reference for this measure. Because whatever it is, if you're going to be specifically identifying it, it's going to need a reference. So might as well add that and not forget it by accident. Okay, so identify the stakeholders, and we know from the rubric, from this rubric here, that there are going to be at least 5 stakeholders, and that for each of them we need to discuss a type of power or authority and the benefit of including them, as well as the later discussion of which ones align with. So because I know that there are going to be 5 different types, even before I start selecting the exact ones, I can work on my outline and type in placeholders for those. Now again, going back to the rubric here, see, okay, type of power or authority in the organization and the benefit of including for each of them. So we should put spaces for that in our outline as well. Alright, so I've got my placeholders for at least the 5 required ones. It could be more, but start with at least 5. And then we've covered this here, so a helpful thing when you're outlining is to cross off things that you've adapted into another form. So we adapted that into this. And I'm looking at this and saying, okay, I want to start here with a list of all 5 or more stakeholders. So that'll come before the list of the 5 or more. And you can use the language here. And of course you will expand this and follow up on it. But for giving yourself a list of, oh, here are things that I know I need to decide, here are things that I need to research, now we have a list that will guarantee that we get at least the required 5 types of stakeholders, as well as the different bits of information about them and the rationale. And then we'll add a conclusion after that, and you want to add more fleshed out introduction, but we have our basic list of ingredients. And now is a good time to check, have we listed everything that is in the rubric, at least 5 stakeholders related to the chosen performance measure, 2 things for each, got those so far, which should be aligned with, and the rationale for that, got that, and the rest is formatting correctly. Now, make sure you don't miss this last bit, the reference page with 1 or 2 sources less than 5 years old. So anything from the course materials that you're citing, of course, but this desire for recent research, there's so much that changes in U.S. healthcare based on, for example, who's in the White House and the direction they take, or what Congress does to pass laws that change insurance reimbursements. And so it's important to make sure that you are dealing with recent information and current issues. So very likely you will be wanting to track down an additional source with this, which I strongly recommend consulting the library staff if you are not otherwise familiar and comfortable with this, to make sure that you have something that is published within the last 5 years. Ideally less than that, because you might want to use a source for another thing down the line, but at least in the last 5 years, which is 2022 now, so 2017 or earlier. And that wraps things up for today. So just to recap, we've discussed the concept of stakeholders, we've looked at the particular requirements of this assignment, and we've talked about the sources that you know you will be drawing from and how to cite and reference those, including the peculiarities of a YouTube video where the channel name and the speaker are not the same. And we've talked through how to take the instructions and go to drafting and outlining. If you have any additional questions, you are more than welcome to contact us by emailing onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. You can schedule an appointment, visit the Online Writing Center website, and with that, have a good day.